Okay, let's say our Asok B'divrei Torah blessing together. Baruch atah
Adonai,
Adonai
melech haolam,
asher
Shanu, Tzivanu,
Asok B'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, rule of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. All right. Zoya, would you read Zeresh and 1 foot, please?
Are you talking to me?
Or
I was half paying attention. That's why I'm asking.
no, I was asking Zoya.
I'm sorry, it took me a while to make myself unmute.
That is okay.
Okay. Zeresh is in the biblical book of Esther. She's Haman's wife. Some people hiss when her name is read during the Megillah reading on Purim.
Thank you. All right. So now that we all know basically who we're talking about, now we can get into her story. Norma, would you read Act 1, please?
That day, leaving Esther's first party, Haman went out happy and lighthearted. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the palace gate, and Mordecai did not rise or even stir on his account, Haman was filled with rage at him. Nevertheless, Haman controlled himself and went home. He sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh, and Haman told them about his great wealth and his many sons, and all about how the king had promoted him and advanced him above the officials and the king's courtiers. What is more, said Haman, Queen Esther gave a feast, and besides the king, she did not have anyone but me. And tomorrow, too, I am invited by her along with the king. Yet all this means nothing to me every time I see that Jew Mordecai sitting in the palace gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a stake be put up, 50 cubits high, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then you can go gaily with the king to the feast. The proposal pleased Haman, and he had the stake put up.
Thank you.
Context. This is from the biblical book of Esther. It happens after Mordecai refuses to bow to Haman. Haman convinces the king to allow the Jews to be killed, even though his beef is only with Mordecai. And Queen Esther invites Haman and the king to a private dinner party. Note that Zeresh isn't in the room where it happened. To quote Hamilton, as a woman who isn't the queen, all she can do is talk to her husband at home.
Thank you. All right. So, Zeresh's husband, Haman, he's got service. He's got problems.
He thinks he does.
Well, from her perspective, he's got problems. So, how could Zeresh have responded to her husband's problems?
What?
How could Zeresh, Haman's wife, have responded to her husband's problems?
She could have asked him if he was certain it wasn't his imagination.
That go on, Herb.
She could have tried to talk him out of his fury. I get upset often about how women always get the blame.
I mean, she could have riled them up more even. She probably didn't like Mordecai either.
And to put up a 50-foot stake and impale him?
Haman, did you ask him why he won't bow down to you?
Yeah.
She should have made him some hamantaschen. Would improve his temper.
My guess is she's probably heard this again and again and again from him because, I mean, he went to the whole thing of asking, to have all the Jews killed in the entire kingdom, and that's gone out. And so she's probably heard this over and over and over again from him. But by the same token, she could have, I agree with somebody else. I mean, that's what I would have done. I would have tried to get him to chillax a little bit instead of winding him up, because this whole idea of building the stake or putting the stake out there, I mean, that's just building up his anger and rage. And, I would have said, hey, you know what? In a couple of months, he's going to die anyway. And just think how great that will feel, yada, yada, and that whole thing. I think she just kind of riled him up.
Diane, it sounds like you're saying she should have said to Haman, let's sit down. Let's take a deep breath. Let's do some meditation for a half an hour. Let's calm you down.
Well, maybe
No,
she.
if it were me, especially the guy's got a huge ego, I would have said, look, you know how fantastic you are. I mean, look at all you have going for you. And look, today you got invited. And, this guy is nothing compared to you. Let it go,
Well, maybe she
I would have
had.
built up his ego and, that sort of thing.
Ellen, you forgot the last line. Let's eat.
Yes.
But I think she had some
Good memory,
conceit,
Herb.
and she was insecure in her position, social position, and she said, "No, how dare? What's this? You're the second most important man in the kingdom. This is an insult to me as well as to you." In her social standing with her friends and with everybody else, and a person who might be very insecure if she's projecting herself through her husband. So that's my take on it. And I don't know if she was giving him mean advice. She was out of control. Who knew what the circumstances were going to be or the consequences? But as I tell my grandson, think twice about what you're going to do and what the consequences are. But who knew what the parameters were that she used to consider? Who would have thought that Queen Esther was going to rat on this guy and the tables would be turned?
I mean, this whole story reminds me of Lady Macbeth, doesn't it?
Carry on. Keep going.
Dan, for those of us who have, it's been a bit since we've read Macbeth, could you draw out the comparison?
Oh, Lady Macbeth?
Yeah.
Well, so they were both power hungry, Macbeth and his wife, and they had, of course, in Macbeth, they had prophecies, but here it's kind of the same thing. They have this indication that things are going a certain way. Well, but the indications they're getting, they're falsely reading these indications. And if they had taken different steps, they still could have preserved their situation or improved their situation over, the prophecies in Macbeth, or here, the indications with Queen Esther and the dinner with her husband. But, they're completely misreading the signals and thinking, if I just do this one more thing, it'll improve my position even more. And what it actually does is damn their position even more.
Well, maybe it was Queen Esther that was the tricky one who was sending signals that were to have them lead them in one direction and make them feel comfortable when she was plotting something else. Yeah. Come and we'll have a discussion. And when somebody comes into the room and says, "Oh, look at the way you're dressed," and you start knocking them, and you're deflating. There's all sorts of ways of manipulating.
It seems to me like they was on the same page, her and her husband.
I feel compelled to add that it's not just her who gives the advice, but her and all of his friends. before we lump it all on her.
But it seems like to me that they
all was on the same page. It's like the phrase, birds of a feather flock together.
I just think that Zeresh was a nasty, inconsequential woman who wanted power in some way. Her husband had very little power, and she wanted to get at it in some way.
It's interesting that it's not just Zeresh, but it's Zeresh and all his friends. So it's a kind of a team effort there. We can't really just point to her. She's part of the mob. How late in the story does this happen?
This is chapter 5 out of 10.
Yeah.
At this point, Haman is arguably at the peak of his power, although he doesn't know that yet.
Can I say one more thing?
Please.
The weird thing to me about Haman is that he wasn't happy or satisfied with what he had until he would have got rid of Mordecai. And that is disturbing to me. I can't be happy unless I'm dead. There's something wrong with a person that thinks that way. Mentally, I mean.
Just like today's billionaires who want even more.
So does Haman talk about doing this before this crowd suggests it? Or do they suggest it? No, so he's just
he's at this point he has already put in motion plans to have all the Jews killed. But they aren't and that's because he is upset at Mordecai, but he has not yet specifically gone after Mordecai ahead of time, I guess.
May I ask if picking on something Michelle said, there's something artificial about the problem here. I remember being taught as a child that the Jews don't bow down before other people, blah, blah, blah. But then I learned that in the halakha, it's perfectly all right to bow to somebody and be polite in that way. And I don't know if the rabbis resolve that or deal with that at all, but it's bothered me for a long time. Is that an invented, I mean, the whole story might be invented, but is that a problem that's created here? In other words, what was to stop Mordecai from simply being polite when the king's big, advisor is there?
Yeah, the rabbis do pick up on that, and they say that Haman had idols in his pockets, and that he showed them to Mordecai, so that then Mordecai could only say I only bow to God.
That's wonderful. So they recognize this very squarely as a problem.
Yes.
And they have I didn't know that. Thank you.
David?
Yeah.
Isn't it also that Haman is a descendant of Amalek?
Yes.
Yes.
So in the Megillah, Haman is described as an Agagite. And in the Haftorah that we read 2 days ago from book of 1 Samuel, it talks about how Agag is the king of the Amalekites. And so using an Aristotelian syllogism of if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, if Amalek equals Agag and Agag equals Haman, then Amalek equals Haman. And so we have Amalek, which according to a text we read a couple weeks ago, and then there was a reminder of it that we read this past Saturday, when the Israelites were leaving Egypt and they'd crossed the Sea of Reeds. The Amalekites opposed them, which, they weren't the only one. But what made the Amalekites different was that they attacked from the back of the group, where the stragglers and the people least able to defend themselves were to be found. And so because they didn't fight fair, that meant that they were singled out as the embodiment of evil, and evil had to be destroyed. The person who was sent to do that in the story that we read from the first book of Samuel was Saul. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. Also from the tribe of Benjamin is Mordecai. And so the book of Esther is a whole bunch of things, but one of the things that it is a sequel, I guess, to Benjamin versus Amalek, played out in a later generation. Which is why we get those details about who Mordecai's ancestors were and who Haman's ancestors were. They could have been anybody, but they were very specifically chosen to line up with Saul and Agag.
Could that be one of the reasons why Mordecai doesn't bow and show this kind of respect to Haman? Is Mordecai aware maybe of that? I don't know.
That was the point, yes.
It's possible. The text doesn't tell us that he is, but it is certainly possible, and one could make a midrash about it if it hasn't already been made.
I see.
On a less elevated level, Mordecai had just saved the life of the king from a plot. So when the king was looking for a new second in command, it would have made sense for Mordecai to be tapped. He'd just saved the king's life. So perhaps part of this is a sense of rivalry. Who is that guy that I should bow down to him?
I always thought that the relationship between Haman and Amalek was a construct of the rabbis that came later.
They are connecting dots that the Bible has laid out to be connected already. The rabbis
Can
make
I
a
say
lot.
one more thing?
Yes, please.
I was gonna say, and another thing about Haman is you can hear that to our day, because he took what Mordecai did, and he blamed the whole race for it. I'm not gonna only get rid of that one, but I'm gonna get rid of all of them. Irritates me. So that's something that is disturbing too. When you take something what one race does and then you blame the whole race. I just hate them all.
Absolutely. And as a slight note of correction, I wouldn't say that the Jews are a race, because there are Jews of many races, but we are certainly a people. So your point is well taken. Your point is well taken. Thank you. All right, let's go back to Zeresh. So nearly everybody tries to make good choices from their own perspective. Assuming good intentions for Zeresh, which is a Jewish thing to do, although not usually applied to Zeresh, but we're going to do it anyway. What might she have been thinking to make such a suggestion? Okay.
I think she's supporting her husband and maybe even protecting him a little. I mean, in in King Ahasuerus's world, it's kill or be killed. So, this decree has been sent out, but it does not guarantee that Mordecai would not take down Haman before that. So in her mind, she could be just supporting her husband and keeping him safe.
David, maybe like your question at the beginning, she was giving mean advice.
Yes. So tapping into the thinking that we saw, either your own or from others, like, make a backstory. What might have been in Zeresh's history, none of which we are given, you are seeing the first time that we meet her. What might have been in her backstory that would cause her to suggest something like this?
She didn't have a good parenting. She was jealous. I mean, it could have been a variety of things. To give mean advice.
Excellent. Other thoughts?
Yeah, maybe she comes from an aggressive family. Everybody that you eliminate as directly and as strongly as you can anything that's a threat.
Perhaps, somewhat building off of that, she perceived Mordecai as a larger threat to the stability of the larger country as a whole. And so maybe that's what she was thinking about.
You're going around having people disobeying royal orders. What kind of society, and this sort of thing is allowed to spread. What sort of society will we get to?
Yeah, so that maybe that's assuming that Zeresh has like better intentions. Maybe that's what's going on in her head.
I would say that because she's married to Haman, he's a wicked man. And if you're married to a wicked man, you become, just like him. So when he comes home and says that, Mordecai is such a horrible person, he's not bowing down to him, me, and I am here, second in command. So of course she's going to believe her husband. That's her husband.
I don't think Zeresh has good intentions. I think I don't know what her family was like, but clearly she did marry a guy that was awful. And it was her choice. Maybe it wasn't her choice, but she did choose to marry Haman. And she does not have, like I said, a lot of power, much power. And she probably never will if things stay the same. But if she could get rid of the people that do have power, like Mordecai and Esther, and her husband is raised to a level number 2, next level 1, she also might be raised up a level. And people would admire her as much as they like Ahasuerus. I don't know, but I don't think she's a good thing. I think it's all about her need for recognition and power.
All right. Speaking of that, Zeresh is married to the king's chief advisor. How might this have affected her daily life, both positively and negatively?
I think quite a few people have touched on Zeresh's pleasure in enjoying all of the benefits of royalty. And I think she was identifying so much with her husband and with the king, and that her self-esteem depended on their position. And so she was determined to maintain their power because she'd be maintaining her own power.
Oh, I think so touching on how might this have affected her daily life negatively. The king's court is not a stable place. He's very volatile. I mean, we can remember what he did to
Vashti.
Vashti. And then that, gets sent out to all of the women, like, oh, obey your husband. So, it's not really, for all the benefits that there might be, it's not really a safe space. So, I mean, that leaves you feeling vulnerable, at risk. So, that can kind of lead to reacting rather than thinking things through calmly and rationally. Oh, this guy, this threat could escalate. Let's just get rid of this guy.
Perhaps in terms of how it affected her life positively, I'm thinking maybe just what are perks that would come from being in a close proximity to like nobility. So maybe she had a better quality of living, like physically speaking. But on the flip side, it's like the court of a very patriarchal society. So kind of building off of what was said previously, especially with the decree that was sent out earlier, that probably also had some effect on like her social well-being. It's not like she has the power in the court per se either, so maybe caused a little bit of isolation for her socially, I would imagine, and maybe that didn't contribute to a good mental state.
And I also think about just as Esther and Mordecai are Jews, minorities in the area, Haman and Zeresh are too. So they may also be feeling some vulnerability from that as well, to add to the negatively.
They're minorities because they're Amalekites who
they're not Persians.
Right.
Well, Zeresh maybe, we don't know about her.
Got me thinking. Someone mentioned that this had come out after the edict that every man should be the ruler of his home. And yet in this story, he doesn't know what to do. And it's his wife saying, why don't you? And he said, oh, that's a good idea. So this may be part of this, the whole Purim ethos.
Yeah. Delightful.
Kate, I want to say some of the points you've made on the negative side, and I think Zoya did too. A lot I've read about courts in general, like King Henry VIII and, Roman courts and stuff like that. These royal courts, they were vicious and competitive, and they were all very unstable. I mean, when you have somebody's ego and decision-making power as the single guiding light for everything, your position is very tenuous based on how well you're viewed by that person and how you can jockey for position. And so I think they were both aware of that and
yeah,
that sort of thing. On the flip side of that, though, what I will say is my ex-husband was actually a physician in training. He wasn't even, well, he did become a physician while we were married briefly before we got a divorce. And I can tell you, even in that lowly position, because I kind of consider that a lowly position, I remember being amazed at the benefits that accrued to me as like, and again, he wasn't even a full-fledged operating doctor yet, but the people who liked me and, tried to kind of be friends with me and would try to get advice from my husband through me. And it was kind of amazing. And I think of that in conjunction with this woman, that I mean, what's a doctor? I mean, I don't mean to minimize that, but I mean, in society, I mean, it's a profession, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's not like some hotsy-totsy politician or king or whatever. And yet you, as the spouse of that person, you kind of accrue a lot of benefits associated with that. So
Diane, I relate to that. When my husband was even an intern, people would call me up and say, I dropped all my medicine in the toilet by accident. Do you think Howard can write me a prescription for Valium or, something like that? I said, no, no, no.
or then they start to tell you symptoms. What do you think
Yeah,
that could
what
be?
do you think
Could you
I
ask
have?
your husband? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But is that a benefit to you? People calling you and asking you for advice? I don't know.
No, it was
No, it's
annoying.
not. No, it's
Yeah.
no, that's not. But it's amazing the people who want to be friends with you too, or the people who invite you to things like, oh, could you come to this ladies thing, or could you do this? Or, all of a sudden you're like Ms. Popular. And
Yeah, right.
Can I say one more thing that I was thinking about?
Please.
I was thinking about, I wonder, did she have people ask her about Mordecai not bowing to her husband? You know how people like to stir up problems.
They do.
I'm also sorry, no, go ahead, whoever that was. No, okay. I don't know, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm also I see your hand, David.
Yes, because looking at the time, I think we should jump ahead, and then you can raise your point. But thank you for noticing. All right, Kim, would you read Act 2, please?
So Haman took the garb and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and paraded him through the city square. And he proclaimed before him, "This is what is done for the man whom the king desires to honor." Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate while Haman hurried home, his head covered in mourning. There, Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had befallen him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish stock, you will not overcome him. You will fall before him to your ruin." While they were all speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurriedly brought Haman to the banquet, which Esther had prepared.
Context, please.
Context, this is from the biblical book of Esther, a chapter later. It happens after the king can't sleep, perhaps due to building the gallows. His servant reads the part in the royal chronicles about how Mordecai saved the king's life. Haman comes to ask to kill Mordecai. The king asks Haman how somebody ought to be rewarded, and Haman answers, assuming that it is him who is going to be honored.
Thank you. All right, so how might Zeresh be feeling about her husband's possible ruin that he has just foreseen?
I guess they changed their attitudes very quickly when they found out that Mordecai was gonna be honored before the king, and then that's when they all turned on him and said that he was gonna fall. But that's what people do. They would give you bad advice and they will flee like roaches.
But it's not just that it's Mordecai that he has to be afraid of, but it's this I don't know what to call it, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic viewpoint that if Mordecai is Jewish, you will not overcome him. It's almost like, forget it.
Jews are too powerful.
If he wasn't Jewish, maybe you would have, maybe you would have a chance there, Haman.
Devious and tricky. So what has changed? Not much.
Yeah.
All right, Kate, what were you going to say before, now that we've moved ahead in the story?
Oh, I mean, it's nothing super important. I was thinking about this line of Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, yada yada. And I was thinking of her maybe trying to jump the gun. Like, cause they knew he was Jewish, so maybe she's like, well, he hasn't started to fall before him yet. Maybe we can preemptively strike, and then the very next chapter is Haman's
Political assassination.
Yeah. So that's all. I was just thinking about that. Nothing important.
But didn't it say earlier, David, that Zeresh didn't really have any power except in her home to talk to him? So
Correct.
she really didn't have power. It was the only place where she could make some comments.
Right. She might have had social power, but she did not have political power.
No political.
But one thing that I don't understand, if I understand the story correctly, Mordecai actually went to the meeting after they told him that he was gonna fall. I think I would have been packing my bags, leaving.
You're saying that if you had been Mordecai, so who would have been
After
leaving?
my family told me,
Haman.
I would have been thinking, right. This is not a good situation for me. Bye. I'll see y'all later. I am out of here. But I think that he was so, I don't even know what to say, mentally unstable, that he probably thought that he was gonna overcome some type of way.
He's still a rich man.
I don't think that Mordecai wanted to abandon his niece, Esther. So no, he would not have left.
No, I think what the comment is about is that if Haman had just been told you're doomed, then Haman would have logically left town.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, I look at this text and I wonder, and I've never noticed this before or thought of it, the king's messengers arrive while Zeresh and Haman's friends are still talking to him, and they hurriedly bring Haman to the banquet, so he doesn't really have a chance to leave.
Not a lot of processing time.
Yeah.
But when he was with his family and they was telling him that he was gonna fall,
he could have at least tried to leave.
I would have been leaving then, but the Bible do say that pride come before a fall. So maybe it was just his pride that right there I got in the way, because please, somebody telling me that, and then when you think about it, I don't know, but everybody thinks differently.
Yeah.
Mordecai is repeatedly referred to as Mordecai the Jew. And then his wife says to him, if he's of Jewish stock, Jewish seed, you will not overcome him. As if she hasn't appreciated the fact that he was Jewish already, or that she has this sense about the Jews and how they pull the strings, or whatever is meant by that. It's a curious thing to say if he's Jewish when he's been referred to as a Jew by the king and by everybody, or it's Esther's connection might be a little less clear, but his.
Yeah, it is kind of a strange thing because that's the whole reason that edict went out to destroy the Jewish people, was because of Mordecai. So it's kind of like, it's not a secret.
But Zeresh is out of the loop.
She had to have known, though. I mean, if he comes home and talks to her about this sort of stuff, he had to have talked about that too.
Well, maybe it's a measure of grammar, and it's not really if, like, she's not doubting it. She's saying since. It might mean like, since he's a Jew, you're not going to beat him.
Could be.
All right, next question. What can we guess about the marriage of Haman and Zeresh based on what we have seen in the text?
Question. Did Haman have more than one wife?
We are not told that he did.
I mean, he definitely trusts her.
Apparently, Zeresh runs the household.
Bringing his biggest problems to her.
I'm beginning to think that Lady Macbeth line is maybe more powerful than I thought at the beginning. More appropriate.
Somebody before said something about birds of a feather flock together, and these two kind of deserve each other. They're not very nice.
Well, maybe they were partners in the political scheming as well. If she's giving him advice now, maybe she was giving him advice before this. It's not be a unique situation. It seems that he comes home and he discusses things with his family.
I think we see Haman as being a rather weak character, and Zeresh as being a dominating force in their marriage and in their lives together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never noticed it before, but it's like he skulks home and, talks to his advisors and his wife. He skulks home basically with his tail between his legs, and seeks support and advice from his wife and advisors.
Yeah, that's normal. Is it when you think your advisors, you have more than one opinion. I've done that. I've come home sometimes and had discussions with my wife, if only as a sounding board. Other people might see things in a different way.
Oh, no, I have advisors. I mean, I have nothing against advisors. I have advisors in my own life. It's just,
Right.
He seems like a weaker character than a stronger character. That's all. Like,
No, it may be. Yes, I can see it that way as well.
Yeah, he's a whiner. Also, look what Mordecai did to me.
Doesn't it say something how he ran home like with his head covered? Yeah, that's funny.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, verse 12.
Yeah.
He returned to the king's gate. Well, Mordecai returned to the king's gate while Haman hurried home, his head covered in mourning.
Yeah, I guess he was embarrassed after he had to give honor to Mordecai.
All right. So, given Zeresh's goal, which was get rid of Mordecai, do you think that she gave bad advice? And do you think that he thought at some point that she gave bad advice?
So that's very interesting because when everything was over, I don't think it mentions what happened to her.
No,
Because it does.
it does not. You are correct.
Well then, to me, if that's the case, if nothing happened to her, I mean, probably was happy because something happened to Haman, something happened to the sons, so she got away with it. And then I guess the other friends that gave him bad advice too. So that let people know you better be careful who you keep company with and who you take advice from.
After listening to all of this, I'm wondering if didn't give bad advice necessarily, except that maybe she wanted to get rid of Haman herself. Maybe it's all a setup.
That's funny.
I mean, who knows, right? But
Right.
you hear this on the news all the time.
World's newest bankrupt.
What I find interesting in this whole story so far is that nobody seems to know that Esther is Jewish, even though they all know she's Mordecai's niece. And you would have thought that with all the pretty ladies in the kingdom who were invited to interview, if you will, or apply for the job as the king's wife, they would have been vetted and they would have known she was a Hebrew.
Well,
So there's
did they
something around
know?
this that doesn't make a lot of sense in the long run.
Isn't there somewhere in there where Haman said to not to mention that to when he advised Esther?
Yeah.
Mordecai.
Mordecai said that, not Haman.
Correct.
Yes.
Can you
Well,
guys hear me?
I don't know that people knew she was Jewish outside the harem, because it was that eunuch who she found favor in his eyes, and he's the one who gave her all the advice on how to behave. And I mean, he really liked her, so he advised her well, and he may have known, but I'm not sure that it's something that he published, or she didn't talk about it, I don't believe, right? So I'm not sure the king knew, or anybody outside the harem, or maybe not even everybody in the harem.
I didn't know who would know.
Her relationship with Mordecai might have been known at the time that she was abducted, but it probably would have been scrubbed from her resume, because at that point it wasn't significant. She was just another woman, young woman,
Beautiful.
being dragged to the harem against her will to be used sexually by this evil monarch and then abandoned in the harem. This is serial rape. And somehow Esther emerges. But there's parallel language between the Garden of Eden story and the King Ahasuerus story. And just as Adam is told to see if he can find companionship among the animals before finally being given his helpmate. It is as if the king is treating this as a herd of animals. They're subhuman in his eyes. It's really dreadful.
Noting the time, I'm going to point out what else is in the source sheet, and then you'll be able to look at it between now and Purim or afterwards. So after Haman is killed on the stake that he set up for Mordecai, then the king gives Haman's property, his house, it says in the Hebrew, to Mordecai. So, so this raises the question of what happens to Zeresh. Is she out of a home? The text doesn't tell us. We also have the fact that Haman's kids are killed. That whole collective punishment thing that Haman was planning on having done to the Jews because of Mordecai, which means these are Zeresh's kids. So some things for you to think about there. Here's a Purim spiel song about Zeresh, to the song of Easy Street from Annie. This was from Anshe Emet's Purim spiel last year. An article from the Jewish Women's Archive about Zeresh, compiling all the midrashim into paragraph form. Here is a half-hour video about Zeresh. There's not a whole lot out there, but this one seemed to be good. And then all of the rabbinic mentions of Zeresh, including a possible backstory for her, making up who her father might be, that he was the guy who reported on the Jews building the walls of Jerusalem to the Persian Empire and emperor and tried to get them stopped. So connecting some dots there in the rabbinic imagination. So that is what we have in the source sheet. I will, God willing, send it to you tomorrow. Stop the share and the recording.